Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
Coming up today, a look at a pilgrimage from Buxton, Canada to Louisiana. Genevieve Stewart will be taking a look at the Creole language, and then we'll visit the Big Buddy program in Baton Rouge. I'm Rob Hinton, and we'll have those stories today on Folks.
Everybody says folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks who live, folks got to give, folks got to care, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of us, who touches us all? To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Folks. First up today, we have a story about a Canadian pilgrimage. It involves a group of black Canadians from Buxton, Canada, who came to Louisiana to discover their roots. They came to Louisiana from North Buxton, Canada by bus, all ancestors of 15 slaves taken to Canada by the Reverend William King.
After inheriting them, he didn't want them to, well, he couldn't really free them in the state of Louisiana because they may be seized and sold back into slavery. Detesting slavery the way he did, he felt his only hope and their only survival really hinged upon him taking them out of here and going on to Canada, purchasing land where he did buy 4,500 acres of ground. Of course, that large area was more, I guess, than what you'd consider 15 people needing. But he was wise enough to realize that being so close to the border of this country, that it was going to become a haven for fugitive slaves, and that it did.
Mrs. Smith, who organized the Canadians' trip, first became interested in the connection between Louisiana and Buxton, Canada, while reading this book.
This book really has only about a paragraph talking about a plantation owner from Louisiana who inherited 15 slaves, but of course not liking slavery, he decided to take them to Canada, and this is where that story begins. And with me, it was this book.
The first stop on the pilgrimage was a tour of the courthouse in Clinton, the same courthouse where Reverend King transacted a lot of his business.
I wanted them to retrace Reverend King's route. I wanted them to see buildings that he had seen, or to visit places that their ancestors were familiar with. And that's why I took them to the courthouse first, because Reverend King did transact his business in that very building. And of course, that's where we found the will that I had already, pulled together, knew where it was. And of course, the clerk of court was expecting us, so she had it ready. And they were eager to get copies of that will, because it did list those slaves by name that Mr. Farris willed to his daughter. And of course, they were able to get those wills.
After the stop in Clinton, the Canadians ventured on to a church in Jackson, Louisiana. It was there that we got a chance to talk to some of them.
The pilgrimage has been very fulfilling in that for most of us, it's a first. And we really didn't know what to expect, but regardless of what we expected, this has far exceeded our expectations, I'll assure you. And as I say, it being a first, we were kind of feeling our way, but as it advances, everybody, because of the The general nature of the people with whom we've been in contact, it's just like old home week, you know. And everyone has really been put at ease, and there's no strained relationships, and we're really looking forward to the balance of the pilgrimage.
When we started out, you don't know just who you're going to meet or all, you know. You feel that you're going to wind up meeting a whole lot of fine people, and certainly we have, and they've gone all out here to make us happy. I was talking to one gentleman in there, he mentioned about being in Victoria, and I'm sure he didn't realize how many miles he was from where we're from. And we're from more of the central part, we're in Ontario. He was talking about being in British Columbia area, which is about 3,000 miles, I think it is, from the area that we live in. But we are enjoying ourselves, and certainly we know as we get down into New Orleans that it's even going to be greater. You know.
My grandfather knew B. King from this area, but he didn't, any of his sisters and brothers didn't come along with him, so therefore we've never had any contact with anyone.
The night before the pilgrimage, officials at Southern University staged a concert to honor the Canadians. A concert featuring spirituals, jazz, and Black Creole songs. We are now going to turn our attention to the Creole language, a language primarily spoken by Black Southern Louisianians. Now, when directly translated into English, Creole colloquialisms have had an effect on all Louisiana citizens, as Genevieve Stewart discovered.
Mostly all of us here in Louisiana have had contact with Creole, either speaking or trying to understand it. Expressions such as parking on the banquette, making groceries, or saving clothes have their origins in the Creole dialect. Well, I ventured to Breaux Bridge to listen and learn more about this Louisiana phenomena, de Creole.
You see, Creole is a mixture of French, and I imagine Spanish and English. When I was overseas in France, I did exceptionally well making people understand what I wanted, and did well. It's not really French. There are a lot of things that I cannot say in French. I can say it in Creole, and if you speak only French, you will understand. It's a sort of a broken French and a mixture with, you know, English and Spanish.
I would define Creole as a slang language, a get-over language where people, black people especially in this area, spoke different from the Cajun French. And that was, a lot of times it was just a get over and get the words, would get the points out to themselves and not letting nobody know what's going on.
There's little documentation on how the Creole dialect evolved because it is not written. It is an idiomatic language and an oral tradition. Joseph Jones states a commonly repeated theory of its origins.
You will not find this in any book. I think it's just something that was handed down to us from generation to generation. My understanding is that as far as the black French, the French that, the Creole that we speak, came about as a result of the slaves developing a sort of a lingo that the masters could not understand. So the kind of French that we speak is not the same as the so-called Cajun French. It's altogether different. And the slaves who were in this particular area were enslaved by people who came from Canada who spoke French, pure French. And they developed their own French as a sort of an escape thing where you just couldn't understand this could-y-vini thing that where sometimes accused of speaking. And this carried on throughout the years. And even today, the French that we speak here in Breaux Bridge and St. Martinville is different from the French or the Creole that you hear in other areas.
In traveling around the state of Louisiana, can you understand people that speak Creole from other cities?
Yes, I can understand practically every area that they speak Creole in, but it's different from the Creole I speak. A lot of places are different. St. Martin Parish speaks way different from a whole lot of other parishes in southwest Louisiana.
Alexander could not speak a word of English when he started school. He felt that this initially hampered his educational development.
I had a very bad problem when I was going to school to speak English, learn how to speak the language, and then when I learned how to speak English, I was speaking bad English, and so I believe that's why they're getting away from it.
I wouldn't call it a handicap. I think not being able to speak English when you attend school is you're not handicapped. You just have to go and start learning again. It's a handicap in the sense that your progress is perhaps slowed down a little bit because you have to pick up another language. But I think the intelligence is there. The fact that you learn Creole, to me, is indicative of the fact that you have some intelligence, and of course, innate ability plays a part in this. And the kids who spoke Creole when they attended, some of them are doctors today, are lawyers, and they've done exceptionally well. Like I said, it slows you down a little bit because everything in America is English. The books are in English, not French. The curriculum is an English curriculum, and you had to just learn another language. But I don't believe that in as far as preventing children from learning that Creole was a barrier. In some instances, I think it's an asset.
As a child beginning school, could you speak English?
When I came up back here in Breaux Bridge, we, at home, we learned English and French. And of course, the reason for the French is the fact that my grandmother, two grandmothers, could not speak English at all, and she lived in the household, so therefore we had to communicate with her. So it was incumbent upon us to learn French, or Creole, as you will, and also English. My mother saw a need for us to learn English so that when we would attend school, we'd sort of would have a head start over the other kids. And we did, but Creole was spoken by 90% or perhaps more than 90% of the children in that particular area. So going to school meant learning English. And with us, we were fortunate enough to learn English and French at home. So when we attended grade school, for some reason we skipped some grades because of the fact that we could speak English. The nuns at St. Francis of Assisi promoted us to a higher grade because when we attended, we had command of the English language. Of course, when I say command, we could speak English because the English we spoke was really a direct translation from French, from the Creole. And Creole is really not a language in a sense. There are no verbs, subject, agreement, and that sort of thing, but at least we could communicate with people who spoke English, and also we could communicate with kids in the community who spoke only Creole.
Speaking Creole in the classroom was frowned upon and often resulted in punishment.
When I went to school, there were nuns that came practically from all parts of the country. And we had very few nuns from this area that taught us. Majority of them spoke English. And they had a tough time to break us from it. They used to make us write lines like, "I will not speak Creole." And sometime up to 500 to try to break us the habit of speaking it. And that was a very hard, difficult thing for them to stop us from doing, because when we went back home, we had to speak it. Our parents practically couldn't speak English either.
His mother, Mrs. Agnes Alexander, learned to speak English as an adult. She is still more comfortable with speaking Creole. Did your parents speak Creole?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Did they speak any English at all?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No.
When you talk to your friends, do you speak Creole or English?
Well, mostly Creole.
When you have to call offices to check on a bill or something of that sort, do you have any difficulty in people understanding you, what you're saying?
Not too much. No. Not too much.
If you do have difficulty, are there usually people in the offices that can speak Creole or understand it?
Well, some of it understand it, and some, some of them just speak English instead of Creole, you see. But I started Creole.
During Jones' youth, speaking Creole was a preeminent qualification for the hiring of teachers. Consequently, few teachers in Creole-speaking parishes had college degrees.
You had teachers who taught school from the Breaux Bridge community, but they were not degree teachers. They were high school graduates. And again, in those days, if you were not bilingual, you could not speak Creole. You couldn't teach the lower grades. You had to be a Creole-speaking individual. So it was sort of a must to select people from the area, irregardless of whether or not they were college graduates or not. And what would happen, you'd go back and finish, or you'd go back and pick up a few subjects, get your certificate, and so forth and so on, and then continue to teach.
When Jones returned to Breaux Bridge as a college degree teacher, the Creole language was an advantageous instructional tool.
Even myself in teaching mathematics, I had to sometimes revert to Creole to get kids to understand or get the point over. And a lot of times, I mean, kids I taught at school, they're growing now, but they'll tell you now, oh yeah, I remember how Mr. Jones would discuss geometry in Creole. But I did that on a number of occasions.
Although Cajun French and Creole French share their origins in Louisiana, they are two distinctly different dialects.
The Cajun French is more attuned to the French language. There are a lot of French phrases, pure French phrases in Cajun French that is not in the French that blacks in this community speaks. And again, that's going back to the time of slavery, when the blacks were trying to develop a language that whites did not understand, and they could communicate among themselves, and they did fairly well with that.
Tell me something short, sweet, and clean in Creole, and then translate.
I love crawfish. I'm going to translate this in Cajun French and also Black French. Moi l'aime les crébis. Je l'aime les crébis would be the Creole, the Cajun version. Blacks would say moi l'aime les crébis. I love crawfish.
Louisianans are very proud of speaking de Creole. Whatever the language one speaks, being able to communicate is really the bottom line.
The Creole language has helped me a lot. When I went into service, for instance, I was stationed with a lot of guys from Mexico, and these guys spoke Spanish, and it was very easy for me to pick up on what they were talking about, because there was a lot of Spanish mixed up in there. A lot of the words mean the same thing.
Irregardless to how you get the point over, as long as you get it over, whether it be in Creole or English, if you get it over, he has learned something. And learning is relating anyway, so if you can relate, whether it's English or French or Creole, you understand it, then you can communicate.
Even though we can't understand it, some of us just love the sound of the Creole language.
Well, moi t'es content, et puis pour donner toi l'information que tu besoin, pour ton, tout ça me connaît, moi laisser toi connaître ça.
We won't get censored for that, will we?
No.
After watching this segment, everyone should know that parking on the banquette, making groceries, and saving clothes is a direct translation, which means parking on the curb, grocery shopping, and putting away clean laundry. But I'm sure most of you already knew that. Didn't you?
Sure we did. We are now going to tell you about a program for underprivileged youngsters in the Baton Rouge area called the Big Buddy Program. The Big Buddy Program is a nonprofit organization that promotes youth opportunities among children in East Baton Rouge Parish.
To me, the Big Buddy Program is just simply words to denote people working together. Our whole philosophy and the whole way we're set up is just simply, we believe that all of us, everybody, has talents and skills that they can share with somebody else. And there are, in this city, a lot of kids who do not have people willing and able to share those kinds of talents and abilities. So our whole purpose is to just give kids opportunities to reach their potential.
How does it differ from the Big Brother program that we often hear about?
In some ways, it doesn't differ at all. The main difference is that we focus on the community. The kids that we serve basically come from given communities. We don't just provide the one-on-one, but we try to work with the kid apart from the one-on-one. We try to work with the kid in his group setting, in his community, in his school, and in his neighborhood.
So how do the kids benefit from the program?
You know, you change through role models, you change through seeing other people and knowing somebody who's special in your life. And all of us growing up had people who were special, you know, outside of our family. And that's what a Big Buddy is. It's somebody outside the family who is very special to that kid, and that kid looks up to that person, tries to emulate that person. In addition to the one-on-one, we try to work very close in the community where the kids live. Most of the kids come from single-parent families, low-income families. A lot of them come from public housing projects and areas in town where there's a lot of negative influences. You know, the parents may be outstanding parents, but when there's a lot of crime, when there's a lot of drugs and a lot of drinking in the streets where the kids live, they're going to grow up with too much of that inside of them and see too much that they shouldn't see. So we try to work in those communities to provide some positive activities, some athletic teams, some scouting, some other types of cultural activities that the kids can get involved in rather than get involved in the other things. One of the primary resources is also the schools. The schools have been outstanding in letting us come in and work with the kids, in the school setting and providing activities at the school and after school.
One of the volunteers in the program is Michelle Chamberlain. She is a Big Buddy to 12-year-old TOMEKA McGee.
My little buddy's name is TOMEKA, and I feel a part of her life because I feel she relies on me. She calls me if she has a problem. She calls me to help her with her homework. She lets me know what things she wants to do that week. I leave it pretty much up to her, and I just feel sort of like a sister to her in a way.
To the park, feed the ducks, cook, to her house, McDonald's.
Do you like going out with your Big Buddy? Tell us why.
Because I love her.
Very rewarding, and it makes, it's not something selfish because you're not really doing it for yourself, you're doing it for someone else. And when you see that child and you see how excited she is when you come to pick her up and when you take her somewhere that she really enjoys and, just being with her and you're needed and it's just a part of your life, and as it develops, you just get more and more out of it each time.
8-year-old BERTRELL Williams is another of the little buddies.
We go places, we go camping.
What kinds of things do you do on your camping trips?
We go marshmallows, a wind, sing songs, and sing DJ night.
Do you like the Big Buddy program?
Yeah.
Why do you like it?
It's fun.
10-year-old Tashamba Rogers and 11-year-old Gerard Tillotson are two players on one of the basketball teams sponsored by the Big Buddy program. So how's your season gone so far?
All right.
Has the coach been working you pretty hard?
Yes, sir.
How so?
Make us run laps, a lot of laps.
How much practice do you guys put into Tashamba?
A lot.
What's a lot? Every day?
Yeah.
Do you like this Big Buddy program?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me why. Well, if you weren't playing basketball, what would you be doing?
Outside playing basketball.
Outside playing basketball. How can the community get involved in the Big Buddy program?
There's a lot of ways the community can get involved, primarily through volunteers. There's a lot more kids than there are volunteers, and the more volunteers we can get, the more kids we can serve. Also, just the other youth agencies, the schools, their involvement. We, in and of ourselves, as I mentioned, are not an organization looking to be an organization. We're an organization looking to serve kids, and any way that other organizations can come in contact with us, or we can come in contact with them to serve better or to serve more, you know, that's what community involvement is, and that's what, you know, we strive for.
Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with another edition of Folks, and we hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.